I have done it. I have created a monster. Dr. Frankenstein sits in the corner crying, feeling inadequate in the presence of this abomination. Granted, it is a 300 divine abomination, but an abomination that can do it all. You should check out the gameplay where I test a little bit of a limit of what I can do, and it's kind of nuts if you think about it. Either way, we will go through the character, the passive tree, the gear, and as always, the time codes will be found below, including a link towards my budget version if you are brave enough to dive into this crazy Pathfinder Forbidden Rite. But first, we shall dive into some gameplay. So here we have an Uber Exarch fight. I'm going to show you the entirety of the fight because it really encompasses how crazy my build really is in terms of tankiness and sustain. As you can see, my health bar is barely moving. And I'm not doing a lot of damage because I just realized I'm not pressing my despair button as you shoot once every 10 seconds for the wither stacks, which is a lot of damage. But either way, you can see we are standing still. We are not moving. We are simply out recouping the damage we take, in addition to, of course, being very tanky, having those large max hits. This is absolutely insane. This is an Uber boss. End game content, and I am standing still, barely doing anything aside from holding down my right mouse button and pressing the occasional despair. All the mechanics have been nullified. Speaking of mechanics, I am, however, suffering the unfortunate consequence of taking additional waves or phases of balls, but as you can see, it doesn't matter. Even if we get hit by multiple balls at the same time or quickly in succession, we out-heal the pain. And in fact, as you might notice, we have 2 forbidden rites, which is part of the prison stasis tech. We can not only do more damage as well, a little bit more damage, but also have more sustain by hitting ourselves. It's a phenomenal experience to be able to do this on an Uber boss. Now, granted, of course, you can do this much faster if you spec into bossing. This is still partially specced into my mapping setup, my well-rounded setup, if you will. I am level 100 here, which is not necessary. Once you have the stasis prison, you can do this pretty much. However, you can't take that, so I am losing here, if you wish, to avoid that massive blast. And then we just simply go back, and we're done. Barely having to move at all. It is absolutely insane. Now, we do have to move on the Eater of the World. It's a bit of a shorter fight here, because let's be real, that previous video was a little drawn out. I just really wanted to show it off. Now, the Eater of World is the most difficult Uber for us, in my opinion, due to the high physical damage. Now, we can create a higher defense layer against the physical damage by taking something like a Corrupted Dawnbreaker if we really wanted to, or maxing out our Eldritch Implicits. But other than that, if you just have a reasonable amount of skill and able to press your Flame Dash at the right times, you should be able to deal with it, because as you can tell, the damage we do take, you can out-heal. We can take a full beam to the face, as you saw at the beginning, without a problem. And other than that, the boss takes damage quite well and dies as a result. Now here, we're about to see a Simulacrum 30 with a pretty decent monster. There is some chaos resistance on it, which does make our damage go down quite a bit. But I'm not doing any damage right here. I'm not attacking, I mean. I'm just standing still. I'm not attacking, not casting anything, not pressing any buttons. I'm not dying. Simulacrum 30, by the way, and I'm clearing the waves. Even when Kosis starts to show up, there he is, he starts taking a little bit of damage from all the explosions, the proliferations, and all that good stuff. And we're not even clicking anything yet. We can do Simulacrum 30 by being AFK and not using our build, simply because of a 4-lane cast on damage taken, which is not even used for damage, which is incredible. This build has so much power into it and so much quality of life that it is absolutely phenomenal to play and to experience the game with. If you want to try this build yourself out, you can do so. The POB is in the description box, but I am so happy with it, and I hope you are inspired. Real quickly at the end here, I know people like to see how mapping looks like. Well, it's pretty straightforward with explosions and all the Forbidden Rite projectiles. This is actually the map that I turned level 100 in. So very, very proud of that as well. This is my very first level 100, which is a testament to its tankiness, because normally I keep dying halfway through and I just give up. But this time, I was able to push through the pain. And as you can see, packs are dying really quickly. We are moving through everything like butter. The phasing really helps out. And bosses and such are not a problem. We also have incredible tankiness that we can just survive most things, barring maybe an incredible bricked combination of mods and eldritch altars that might hurt us. But otherwise, we are good to go to take on everything. And here she is, the wonderful creation. My level 100 Forbidden Rite Pathfinder, my League project in its final form. Now these are the notes, the FAQ. I've made quite a bit of an essay. You can read this through the POB link in the description box below on your own time. But we will be going through the gems. We will be going through the gear as well as the passive tree. And if you look at the numbers on the left here, these are ethical numbers. I can push this even further by example, turning on Val Haste, 29.5 million. But we don't have permanent Val Haste. I can also add my second Forbidden Rite to the actual link for even a little bit more damage on top of that. Nearly another million. Sorry, nearly another million. So this is ethical. This is actual permanent uptime. No guard skills being used to facilitate these max hits either. This is just permanently all the time forever. So, speaking of, let's get into the actual gems. And we'll start at the beginning. The Aura gems, Malevolence, Enlightened, Purity of Elements, Herald of Agony. Now, the Herald of Agony is mandatory due to the poison chance to hit. Divergent Malevolence is just more damage. Here we have an on-hit link in our shield. Despair, cast when damage taken, temporal chains. Now, the anomalous version is just better damage or better coverage. And cast when damage taken triggers because we are casting Forbidden Rite, which hurts ourselves, which then triggers the cast when damage taken, so we don't have to worry about the enemies having to hit us to trigger this. Val Haste allows us to go very fast, very quick all the time. Well, the haste part does it. The Val Haste part allows us to occasionally go even quicker, 251%, and also do a lot more damage in these burst windows. I keep it on my left click, but you can just use it as a power-up during boss fights on the right times if you desire to do so. Divine Blessing, Increased Duration, Inspirations are the support that allow this wonderful uptime, as well as the free casting thereof. Purifying Flame, Forbidden Rite is another combination of cast when damage taken links. Now, Purifying Flame, a Divergent, allows us to not only get the regen from the ground effect, but also the increased damage taken for enemies standing on our consecrated ground. And this is pretty much up all the time because it's getting spammed. Forbidden Rite is an interesting one. It used to be Blazing Salvo, which is what you're supposed to do if you don't have a stasis prison. But once you cross the 100 recoup percentage, Forbidden Rite becomes the best way, because not only like Blazing Salvo, it has a lot of projectiles, allowing us to do a lot of on-hit effects. It also hurts us, which means faster recoup scaling, because we have more than 100% recoup, as well as it allows us to do a little bit more poison damage, because it is actual chaos damage, which we can then scale into poison, which is phenomenal. Just a little bit of extra. So otherwise, if you don't have the stasis prison, Blazing Salvo, right? Cast when damage taken, of course, level 1. That allows us to cast it as frequently as possible. Alt qualities would be lovely as well on top of that. And an Onslaught, which facilitates permanent uptime on bosses and uniques, where otherwise we might not have it otherwise, which is very good. Forbidden Rite Link, this speaks for itself. Level 21 Divergent for more AoE, better clear. The mandatory Anomalous GMP to get the cost down. Awakened Deadly Ailments, Damage, Spell Echo Anomalous, because it gives us cast speed. The Awakened version doesn't do anything for us, basically, as we are scaling poison and not the on-hit effect. Awakened Void Manipulation is more damage, and Awakened Unbound Ailments, more damage. Speaks for itself. Despair, Vitality, Flame Dash, and our weapon, Despair, is to trigger the Jewel, because we do have to self-cast Despair once every 10 seconds. The triggered Despair does not count. So that's just something you have to keep in mind when playing this. This allows us to get not only curse immunity, but also max wither stacks all the time on everything, basically, due to the amount of hits we are creating. Vitality is for the Watcher's Eye. And then the flame dash is our movement skill. If you prefer Frost Blink, you can do that too. So those are the gems. Moving on to the gear of the build, we will move through it relatively quickly, as you can take your time in the POB yourself. You might have already noticed our overcapping. This is because we want to be able to have a quality of life against certain Eldritch Altar mods, which take away resistances, and I don't want to brick my build by dying suddenly because I have negative resistances. But if you are on a budget, you can, for example, craft gear easier, or perhaps craft something else on it as opposed to resistances, if that is not something you're looking for. You can find it in the budget build as well, in the description box below, if you're looking for a much tighter budget. Otherwise, let's just start at the beginning. Serpent Wand could be a rune dagger. I just happen to have a fractured max roll on a wand and crafted some wonderful stats on it. Tier 1 damage over time, multi, essence, deafening cast speed, as well as a chaos spell skill gem and crafted chaos damage. Spell damage doesn't do anything for us, sadly, but it's what I happen to slam on it as a Hail Mary attempt. We also have a wonderful shield. Tier 1 life, Tier 1 hybrid life, chaos spell skill gems, resistances, as well as effective curses. It's an incredibly important mod since we power our damage up a lot with effective curses. Once you see these hexproof mods or modifiers in maps or reduced effective curses, it's really unfortunate, but your damage is going to go way down as a result. But alas, it won't brick the build. You won't die. We also finished it off with a chance to suppress spell damage. I was unable to obtain a new relic for Mage Bane invocations, so I would have been able to preserve this craft and get cast speed on it, but allowing us to get the mastery for spell suppress as well as this craft allows us to preserve 2 additional points and move on while being completely spell suppress capped. We have a wonderful helm here. A curse effect is the best enchantment. I think Temporal Chain is perhaps even better for single target. Despair just feels pretty good as well. We're also trying to turn a lot of physical damage into elemental damage, which is why we are not scaling armor. We also have, of course, the typical expected resistances and spell suppress on the gear with a big fractured life. And I also managed to hit a +2 level of socketed AoE gems for our auras with a little bit of increased area of effect, which is just very comfy. Stasis Prison. Ah, yes. Stasis Prison. The creation to end all creations. This is so expensive and it's so not necessary, but it is very fun to have. You could just go for a double ganger if that's more your thing. You can almost verbatim plug and play a double ganger in this build, minus a couple of changes. Check the FAQ. But Stasis Prison allows for some interesting stuff like the Forbidden Rite cast on damage, link, as opposed to Blazing Self and all kinds of other stuff, and allows you to heal for more than the damage you take, which is an insane concept. You hurt me for 100, I heal for 140 plus. It is such a weird concept. And because of the excessive recoup, the Progenesis pretty much has no side effect, no downside, making us pretty much not take 50% of hit damage. It's crazy, that interaction. Speaking of crazy, we have a wonderful pair of gloves here. Double resist. Also, once again, AoE gems. Fractured life. Lovely bench. The mandatory chance to poison on hit is there. It has to only be 10%. And some lovely chaos damage over time multi. You could also go for the pinnacle one, which is a lot more damage single target on those pinnacle bosses, but it won't affect you elsewhere, so you have options. Boots, these are lovely too. We have the spell suppress. We have the mandatory enchantment. Do not forget that. We have double res, spell suppress, crafted life. Sadly, couldn't make the fractured life work just yet. Working on it, but so far we do have movement speed with onslaught on kill, which is so comfy and so good feeling for mapping. It allows you to zoom all the time forever. We have the Eternal Struggle. This is a bit tricky to quantify because there are so many mods that you can roll on the Eternal Struggle. But increased duration of ailments with increased curse effect is pretty good. We have increased effect of non-curse aura, which sounds similar but not quite the same. You have to find particular mods that are good for you. There's Chaos Multi, increased chaos damage. People have even been taking additional curse for a triple curse setup or just being able to unspec certain things on the tree. But you'll have to kind of figure out what is available because you are bound to trade for that, sadly, due to the nature of the drop of the Eternal Struggle. We have double Vermilion Rings with failed Crusader Slams. I still have not been able to hit the Crusader Slam. I don't know of anyone who has been able to do it, but it's an incredible pair of rings. Nonetheless, we have Tier 1 Recoup, amped up by the Catalysts, as well as an Unveiled Life with some mana, cast speed, and the Tier 1 Good Suffix. Here we have Strength. On the other one, we have Rarity of Items. It's there. Bite me. And then, of course, we finish it off with a wonderful mandatory non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana cost, which also get amped up to -8 as a result of the Catalysts. So lots of value to be had. They're very easy to craft as well if you want to check out the crafting videos in my YouTube. Ooh, the micro distillery belt. A lot of people getting very confused about this. It is very interesting to craft because a lot of the particular mods you're trying to hit are not labeled. But I was able to, fortunately enough, roll into a double resist, high resist, I think it's tier 2 from the top of my head, as well as a reduced flask charges used, tier 1. And then we unveiled the flask supplied to you have 16% increased effect, which comes, unfortunately, with the debuff of reduced flask charges gained. But with the relic that we have from Sanctum that gives us flask charges, we are able to sustain the Dying Sun permanently, which is the most tricky flask to get up all the time. And it's just a phenomenal thing to even try a Hunter Slam on, which gave us tier 1 chaos damage, which is really good. I would have preferred tier 1 max increased life, but alas, we'll take a tier 1 increased chaos damage. It's really, really good. Progenesis, yes. The entire defensive layer for pretty much every build in existence right now. I'm going to expect this to get nerfed. We're buffing this with over 100% flask effect, so it's incredible. Taste of Hate is also mandatory, allowing us to scale more physical damage into flask or into elemental damage through increased flask effect. The mana cost here is mandatory, but you can use Quicksilver for mapping. I use Jade for bossing. Other people even try to use a Ruby if they cannot yet keep their Dying Sun permanently up, or even a Topaz if they're dealing with lightning damage. It speaks for itself. And then we have the Dying Sun itself as well, which is a different enchantment. I have found that reuse at the end of this flask effect actually facilitates a slightly more consistent uptime, because depending on how your Alchemist Genius buff holds, it sometimes is a little sketchy. So yes, that's the gear we are using. Time to go over the level 100 Pathfinder tree. This is my first level 100. You have so many points to play around with. It is a phenomenal experience. But let us start at some of the more important things to note. For example, this trader right here, one of the Brutal Restraint Timeless Jewels we are using. This is mandatory for this particular build. And you also want at least increased flask effect twice. Now, I managed to find one with 2, as well as a premium poison you inflict deal damage 10% faster. Sadly, we have a dead note here, increased critical strike chance. I would have preferred this to be a non-curse aura effect or poison damage, but it is what it is. Now, if you're not using a stasis prison, this is not entirely dead due to what you spec into in the Master Surgeon. I do have a version here for the Doppelganger. If you spec into it, as you can see, the Ascendancy tree changes. But other than that, we'll continue. We have a wonderful set of clusters. Unspeakable Gifts twice on both clusters. We also have an Unwavering Evil here, as well as a Wicked Pal. On top, we have Unwavering Evil again, just for the increased chaos damage. Not necessary. As well as I said, the Unspeakable Gifts and a Touch of Cruelty, which doesn't scale as well since we have Wither, which is also the thing we anoint with Corruption for. But otherwise, it's just more damage, leading into more sockets for such a medium cluster, with the mandatory Spiked Concoction and Peak Vigor for some additional life to complement that, as well as an AoE cluster. Not necessary. This is just for like mapping. You could just rip this out and maybe spec into Left Shade, or maybe pick up Influence, or just spec into more life or damage, or maybe find a second flask effect duration cluster, which could help you maintain permanent uptime. We do pick up also the Whispers of Doom for the additional curse, as we are using 2 curses and don't have additional curse effect on our necklace. Curse Mastery for crits. Always nice to take a little bit less crit damage. We pick up the mandatory nodes for poison on the spell chance, as well as just spell poison on hit chance in general through those poison clusters. These 2 are not mandatory for traveling, but they are some of the highest damage gains on the tree due to it being cast speed as well as damage with poison. Hence, I've taken them. I've pretty much picked up every single valuable life node that is like 5% or up. There's another one hiding here, but I've decided to go for damage over time multi, because it is quite a chunky amount of damage we get from that. Other than that, it's just jewel sockets. An abyssal jewel is hiding here as well, allowing us to get that phasing for mapping. You could do another rare if you don't care about phasing, or if you are just doing bosses. We also pick up more flask wheels and more life. Speaking of rares, if you do want to find a good rare, I would recommend, while the mandatory ones are increased maximum life, the highest damage mod I believe you can find is chaos damage over time. And then we also have a recoup to buff that recoup mechanic that we are using even further. If I had a perfect jewel, I would have sought for my 4th one, the 4th mod being maybe like a increased cast speed when you have recently crit. Because despite the fact that we're not scaling crit, everything is a base crit, and we are using a lot of hits. Even on a single target, we are bombarding them, so we are always having a recent crit go off. So that would be really useful as well. We are also empowering ourselves with Gathering Winds, which is a phenomenal node. Very expensive, but giving ourselves Tailwind and then amping up that Tailwind is just so much value. And then not to forget, of course, the Balance of Terror, giving us the Wither. If the Balance of Terror Kobold Jewel goes away, we'll probably have to go to a whole different Timeless Jewel. Or we have to use Withering Step again, which is just not comfy. I am not a big fan of that, so we might have to solve some puzzles come next league. But this is the level 100 wheel. If you are not quite level 100 yet, you can decide to cut this cluster jewel right here. You can maybe get rid of some defensive passive. You can also reduce some of the health, which is actually one of the things I am thinking of. Maybe I don't need this 4% life, right? And then I can maybe spec into another damage over time multi, cranking my damage up even further. Or maybe I can pick up some other masteries. Who knows? Or perhaps even work towards a 3rd cluster down here, large cluster, or another small cluster for even more AoE. There are so many options that you can pursue depending on how you would want to do it. It's entirely up to you. I have faith. You can do it. Tune the build as you see fit, but this is my creation. This is the way I have decided to play it. It has been an incredible experience. If you have any questions, check the FAQ or leave a comment or check the Discord channel specifically. We have a dedicated Path of Exile channel. You can just ask anything, and we have plenty of smart people, smarter people than me in that channel that can help you out if they are so willing. Have a good rest of the league, everybody. I am excited to see what's going to come next and if this build will survive. Progenesis isn't going to survive, right? Like, it's going to get nerfed, right? Right? I'm out!